Well, good morning, everybody, and thank you everyone for joining us here at the Planetary Science Simple Seminar Series, again hosted here at UNM. And today we have a very special speaker, a person here, Chip Shearer. So Chip is a member here at the Iowa Institute of Meteoritics. He's a research professor here in the Department of Earth and Planetary Sciences. He's one of the leads for the UNM Sustainable Space Research Grand Challenge. He's a co-lead scientist on the ANCS initiative with Francis McCubbin. He's also the current lead scientist of the CASA Moon Serving Node, centered here at UNM. And he's one of the leads for planetary materials, new views of the Moon 1, new views of the Moon 2, and you have planetary materials 2. I think you're wanting to get that started up. So if anybody is interested that wants to be a part of that initiative, please send Chip an email. I think he'll be doing that sometime in the next year. Right? And of course, he has, one of the coolest PhD students ever, right? But without further ado, Chip, please take it away.
Well, Zach, did he? No, I was thinking about Zach Gallegos. That's what we were talking about, right?
Oh, okay. Yeah, it's definitely not.
If it was the coolest PhD student.
You're all good.
Well, thank you for all attending. And I'm not sure if the draw was me or the breakfast burritos. I guess it was the breakfast burritos. I just want to thank everybody online for joining us. And I'm going to just speak a little bit about a small little project that is part of this larger CASA Moon initiative to look at the pyroclastic deposits on the moon, particularly those collected on the Taurus Littoral Valley from 74001, 74002. Those people, individuals who were involved in this project, the larger project and this project in particular are listed here, and I'm sorry if I left somebody off the list. I think most of the team members are on this list, looking at a wide range of issues tied to this eruptive record. The presentation is kind of outlined here. The goals of this study, and the study is primarily these iron nickel metal droplets. And then what I'm going to just briefly touch base on, because it's kind of fun, is really the importance of this double drive tube, 74001, 74002, and pyroclastic deposits on a whole in terms of providing us fundamental observations, developing fundamental concepts for the nature of the moon. Then I'm just going to skip to this CASA Moon study of 74001, 002 to give you an idea of where this project is heading. And then finally, the last quarter, I'll talk about really the title for this talk, the nature of these pre-eruptive olivines and metal droplets and the pyroclastic deposits. The goal of this project, this really narrowly focused project, is to take off to some degree from work that Mac Rutherford did with his students in the 1990s, in which he was looking at plastic glass beads and from 74001 and 2. And one of his students, shown here, had identified a number of iron nickel metal droplets, some which she grouped in one, which were associated with these pre-eruptive olivines, others that were associated with the pyroclastic glass beads, others that were droplets in these black beads rather than the orange beads, and then some metal fragments that she and their team observed, and they really weren't quite sure how to characterize them. So the goals of this, again, narrowly focused study is to identify the composition of these metal droplets, place them within a geological and stratigraphic context, and probably then utilize these metal droplets associated with these pre-eruptive olivines to better understand the degassing history during the eruption of these pyroclastic units. I'm just going to focus the next few slides, some of the importance and previous work done on these. Lisa Gaddis has, over a long period of time, with her engagement with the United States Geological Survey, identified numerous, I think, well over 100 pyroclastic deposits all over the moon. And that's kind of shown in this upper map of the moon. And those individual dots, data points, are where the pyroclastic deposits occur thus far identified. On the bottom left, that what you see here is the eastern rim of Serenitatis near the Taurus Littoral Valley. And these dots are dots where there were deposits of these black volcanic beads. And this is from Sun et al. In 2023 as part of the ANCSA initiative. And then Sun et al. Also examined, looked a little bit closer and went from this eastern rim of Serenitatis to the Taurus Littoral Valley, and that's on your bottom right, and including Shorty Crater and other potential black bead deposits associated with the Taurus Littoral Valley. The core that was taken, the drive tube, was collected at Station 4 within this great image, LRO image of the Taurus Littoral Valley. And Station 4 is shown there and labeled Shorty Crater. And that's near the lateral extent of this landslide or light mantle deposit that slid off the South Massif. Also shown here is Station 2, where boulders were collected at the base of the South Massif, and also the very famous 73001, 73002 double drive tube, which was the focus of the ANCSA initiative. One point I just really want to make, also the diagram to your right just illustrates in a little bit closer image the landslide deposit, the Lee Lincoln Scarp, the Laura Crater, Station 2, 3, and again, Station 4, adjacent to Shorty Crater. The one point I wanted to make that I'll return to is there is a Station 9 that is shown here on the diagram to your left. And just please keep that in mind in terms of when I'm showing you some compositional data from some of these pyroclastic glasses, that some of them were actually collected from that site. The Shorty Crater is shown in this diagram with one of the Apollo astronauts and the lunar rover on its rim. The sampling location is just on the rim of Shorty Crater, and it's that little boulder that kind of sticks out just to the left of the crater, just right along the rim. And you can see it a little bit better in this diagram here. Again, the diagram to your right is, you can kind of see the boulder. The diagram to the left is a color image, a better color image or enhanced color image that really kind of illustrates why this really stuck out for Jack Schmitt when he was walking at this station. This was, in this kind of this gray lunar background, this orange color and red color and yellow color just stuck out like a sore thumb. And then the diagram to your right is from Jack Schmitt, where it's always great to have an astronaut on the surface of the moon because he did a lot of well-defined geology and just kind of illustrates some of this pyroclastic deposit that's exposed in terms of a red core, an orange inner zone, a yellow outer zone in terms of what he was seeing. This also includes where the core was essentially taken. You can see the 70 centimeter core shown here. And also there were a bunch of soil samples taken from this area, including the famous 74220, which was taken close to the perimeter of the red core shown here. Also, a really interesting rock that was in this area that was collected was 74275. It's a Mare basalt, which appears to be older than the pyroclastic deposit in terms of its chronology. And this is a unique basalt because it also contains xenoliths of dunite, very tiny ones, which is very rare on the moon. So let me give you a little bit of a summary of some of the studies that have been done on this site, and then also tied to other pyroclastic deposits. And again, this is by no means a complete list, and I apologize for those people who I may have left off this list. I'm probably referencing, 10, 15% of the individuals who were involved in this. But I did want to make several points. One, that there was a lot of work done, a lot of people involved, and a lot of different types of information gathered. This core was collected in December of 1973 during Apollo 17. It was X-rayed in its double drive tube in 1974, and then again in 1976, and was finally extruded from the two double drive tubes. I think 74002 was extruded first in 1977, and the lower part of the core, 74001, was extruded in 1978. There is a number of several papers and a preliminary examination report that was produced in 1978 that really illustrates some of the stratigraphy observations that were observed in this core, and that's in the diagram to the upper left that I copied directly from that paper. Carly Peters measured the multispectral properties of 74002, and this is shown in the upper right-hand corner, right up in here, where this kind of shows and illustrates the transition from the part of the core that is really high in orange glass, high titanium glass, and the lower part of that portion of the core that is primarily these black volcanic beads. There are numerous manuscripts by Dave McKay and Grant Hyken and their co-workers that again followed, this initial PE with numerous observations in terms of trying to place stratigraphy and eruptive models of it. And then there were a number of studies early on that recognized surface coatings on these glass beads or these volcanic beads. And fascination for these coatings continued to the present day. And so you can see there was a number of individuals involved in the first recognition of these beads, and this was followed up by the application of more complex and evolved technologies to look at these surface coatings in a lot more detail. And then this is the last kind of summary diagram I'm going to show you. Numerous studies by Delano and colleagues and me and my colleagues really identified a wide range of major trace elements observed in all the volcanic beads, not only from Apollo 17, but all the Apollo sites. And particularly John, Delano dedicated so much of his time and made some very, very fundamental observations with regards to the nature of these. And one thing that he noted that they show a wide range in composition that kind of matched the wide range of composition one saw in the Mare basalts, and that these all were fairly magnesium rich, therefore suggesting that they could be primitive or near primary magmas, which is really critically important to our understanding of Mare magnetism. There's a wide range of experimental studies, one or several by John Longy in the late 80s, early 90s that looked at liquid lines of descent, which are shown in the upper PiO2 versus Mg number that you see there. And these are liquid lines of descent that these pyroclastic compositions would travel along, and illustrating that first they are fairly primitive or near primary, and second they potentially could be brittle melts to a wide range of Mare basalts. And then a wide range of other high pressure, high temperature studies starting in the mid to early 70s and continuing to this year that looked at the phase equilibrium at high pressures and temperatures. And this really led, and this diagram is just kind of one of the diagrams is shown to the middle. That is the temperature of multiple saturation, pressure of multiple saturation. And this overlap at fairly high pressures and temperatures of high titanium basalts or pyroclastic glasses and very low titanium was one of the motivations, again, one observation that led to this model of lunar magma ocean cumulate overturn. It's an important concept that, again, was derived from these sorts of observations. Also, very early, there was some chronology done on these that range suggested age of around 3.7 GA for the deposit, but these primarily focused upon the orange glass beads and not the black beads at all. And there is, I think there will be additional work done by our group, essentially doing argon on individual beads or small individual populations of beads. And then finally, a really breakthrough study. Now that, I would neglect my presentation here if I didn't include this, is again the work that Mac Rutherford did with his students, Alberto Sol, Eric Harvey did on these pyroclastic beads to better understand the water and other volatiles associated with these pyroclastic eruptions, and therefore the potential volatiles that could reside in the interior of the moon. And these are really fundamental observations that have driven lunar science for the past 10 to 20 years. And they're incredible contributions to our understanding of the moon. Now, there are a lot of variations in these pyroclastic beads. And as I mentioned, there is a range in just their transmitted light characteristics, and that's shown in the upper left-hand corner where you see, the orange glasses. This is transmitted light, but what you also see is these black spheres mixed in, and those are the black volcanic beads. And as you can see, again, I'll point this out on the diagram to the far left, is the stratigraphic column illustrating the proportion of orange glass beads to black beads. And the orange beads, again, dominate the upper portion of the column, where the black beads simply dominate the lower portion. These black beads show a wide range of textures, ranging from fairly simple crystals, very small crystallites that you'll see in some of these diagrams, these VSE diagrams or images that were produced by Steve Simon. And you can see increasing complexity. Some of these beads look like they were joined together during eruption. And some of these beads will have vesicles. And the image to the upper far right is really a hollow bead that it looks like a trapped gas fracture that's lost its gas. So there are all sorts of really complex processes really involved in gas eruptions and the preservation of gas components within these glass beads, within these volcanic beads. There also is a wide range of compositions within these beads from various sites. But I just want to again show you the bead compositions from 74001 and 74002. And this is on one of these John Longy liquid lines of descent diagrams. And again, you can see where the 74001-2 glass beads plot. They plot on this liquid line of descent shown here. And they all have compositions very similar to what John Delano called the 74220 glass beads. So most of what we're seeing, at least in the column, seem to be similar to those, but there are some parts that seem to be slightly different and merge with these other glass beads labeled orange 1, orange 2. In addition to orange 1 and orange 2, which are different than most of the beads from the core, there are also Apollo 17 orange beads, which John and I at various times identified. And there are some other beads that are green in color that are referred to as very low titanium basalts or pyroclastic glasses, and they have on the order of 1% TiO2. What's really interesting is most of the orange 1, orange 2, yellow, and the green actually occur not at this site at all, but at Station 9 that I pointed out earlier. So fairly far removed from this. And we have a student, Zach Gallegos, who is looking at that area within the Sculptured Hills, North Massif area, and has identified potential vents that perhaps could be the sources for those, at least one or two of those volcanic glass beads. Also, with regards to how these beads, remember when I showed you these beads kind of plotted on liquid lines of descent? You can see it on this diagram to the left. That essentially kind of overlapped and took you to fields of Mare basalt. So an obvious conclusion is that these are all parental liquids to the crystalline Mare basalts, but they're not. And what you see in the diagram to the right is a diagram that Clive Neal and I produced based on his ICP-MS data on crystalline Mare basalts and my ion microprobe data on these glass beads. And as you can see here, if one is trying to link these by fractional crystallization, these two incompatible elements would be essentially driven, the melt compositions would move up in this direction. And so it appears based on this and other diagrams that the pyroclastic beads, whether they're high titanium or low titanium, are really distinct from the crystalline Mare basalts that we have sampled thus far. That doesn't mean they're not parental to crystalline Mare basalts, but it could be just a sampling issue. They're not related to those crystalline Mare basalts that thus far we've sampled. Okay, let's go ahead and go directly to the topic that I wanted to talk about today. And that is, the work that CASA Moon has done on this suite of samples. And this just illustrates the individual I showed in the first chart, the sorts of projects that individuals were working on. The diagram, the the column, the stratigraphy is shown to the far left. And we have in our possession thin sections that were produced from this column, the stratigraphy. So we do have samples, thin sections of this continuous core. So we can look at the changes in mineralogy, bead shape, bead characteristics, and redefine the stratigraphy. In addition, shown in red boxes, those were regions that we essentially have done XCT imaging of samples that those thin sections were made from. The yellow are samples that we have bulk samples from that stratigraphy that will be used to do a wide range of stable isotope measurements on individual samples. So what's really critical in terms of this overall approach is that we'll have a wide range of stable isotopes from chlorine to sulfur to zinc, etc. And we can, again, have those data points for each split of sample. And then also we can place those data within a stratigraphic context, which really hasn't been done thus far. In addition to individual glass beads, as you can see in the diagram above here, individual glass beads are being plucked out for argon-argon analyses and other types of measurements. And then using our team, we're going to then place all of this data and sample locations within the context of regional and planetary geology. This diagram right here just illustrates, is a lead into the topic, that this just illustrates the BSE images collected by Steve Simon for all these continuous core from the very top, 74002, 6024, all the way to the bottom, 74001, 6039. And this is an example of the types of data that we're getting, the BSE image, and then a wide range of X-ray maps that is shown, magnesium map is shown on the bottom left. All of this data will be available eventually on the CASA Moon site for the community to use. We will use it as a team, but it will also be available for everybody else. An interesting observation that you can see in the magnesium X-ray map are these yellow crystals that seem to pop out of this purple-blue matrix. And these yellow that's showing up in the X-ray maps are these pre-eruptive olivine grains. They were suggested fairly early to be pre-eruptive in that they don't look like they crystallize from one of these pyroclastic glass beads. They have really much more magnesium-rich concentrations. You can see they have Fo 80 to Fo 84, and they have a very, very thin rim. So it's thought that these crystallized prior to eruption and prior to fragmentation of the pyroclastic magmas. And as you can see here, we have this olivine, and it's within the olivine, and at two places, at least in this one, we have these iron, nickel, cobalt metal droplets associated with these. And again, based on Matt Rutherford's observations with regards to these, do these represent some sort of degassing episode or loss of volatiles, or is the melt itself metal saturated prior to eruption? This just illustrates some of the other olivine morphologies that we see with regards to these pre-eruptive olivines. Again, my favorite, again, an A, but, you know, that's a nice euhedral one with iron metal droplets in it, and then some that are skeletal, some partially absorbed. And so the question is that we're answering, or trying to answer, are how common are these different morphologies? How are they distributed through the stratigraphy? And how are the iron metal droplets distributed in different morphologies and within the stratigraphy? And what's the kind of the composition of these droplets? And you know, our analytical strategy for this narrow topic is illustrated here, where we're examining, you know, thin sections and identifying all of the pre-eruptive glass olivines, identifying the locations of the glass feet of the iron metal droplets, then doing XCP imaging to get a three-dimensional understanding of the distribution of both, and then doing essentially analyzing the iron nickel metal and the olivines to better understand how they fit together, when the iron nickel metal crystallized, and then how does all this fit into this, you know, fairly well-defined stratigraphy. This just shows some initial results of our XCT imaging. As I mentioned, we've done 5 sorts of images done by Scott Eckley, who is just an absolute magician in terms of not only looking at and producing these data, and I'm just working the first one. You can see this video on the left, but also for interpreting and processing this data with machine learning. And then the one on the right, which is from lower down, and the double drive tube is shown there. And what you're seeing mostly, I think, is some of these pyroclastic glass beads. You can see there's quite a few of them through the whole column. But what he was able to do is using machine learning and the real contrast between the glasses and these really unique pre-eruptive olivines, he was able to have trained the computer to identify where all these occur and identify these within 3 dimensions. And as you can see here, these are where these videos on the left and the right are from those same samples, Unit 5 and Unit B8. And these really illustrate the distribution of these olivines. And this is just really cool. I couldn't believe he could do this. But it gets cooler. So, you know, so we can get a real handle now on shapes. We can get a handle on sizes, and we can get a handle on distributions. And, you know, this is just a table with regards to some of the olivine stats. And in terms of abundance, and this is volume to total volume of the core, it seems that the abundance of olivine, of these pre-eruptive olivines, decrease from the upper part of the core down into the base. So that seems to correspond to a decrease in these pre-eruptive olivines from the top to the bottom, which corresponds to the stratigraphy, low amounts of pre-eruptive olivines associated with the orange glass, and higher abundances associated with the black beads. Also, what he noted that there doesn't seem to be a noticeable change in morphology or really a change in size either. A cooler thing that he did was, again, I was really kind of interested in the iron nickel metal in addition to the olivine. So what he was able to do is doing some machine learning on his computer and just brute force. He was looking to see where these metal droplets occurred in terms of the stratigraphy, but also where they occurred within the olivines. And this is really fundamental in terms of our interpretation of the origin of these iron nickel metals. And what you'll see on the right is three orthogonal cartoons or videos of this one olivine that he is looking at. And what you can see on the one, particularly the one to the right, he's identified the location of the iron metal droplet and that olivine. And he just painstakingly went through all of these olivines and trying to identify where the metal droplets occur and how many of these olivines it occur in. And so, and the total number of olivines that he examined per sample that he did XCT imaging, he noted that in the upper part of the column, there was approximately 10% of the olivines had these iron metal droplets associated with them. As you move down toward the base, this increased more than double. So it looks like that, again, tied to the amount of olivine, the orange to black beads. This is another sort of observation that fits within that stratigraphy. Also, he noted from these sorts of analyses that the droplets tend to occur not in the interior of the olivine, but commonly outwards toward the rim of the olivine. And so the resolvable high Z inclusions, or the iron nickel metals, occur near the edges or the boundaries. And then there are more olivines with metal inclusions at depth. All of this is really pretty profound with regards to the origin of these droplets. So what we also did, we looked closely at the composition of the olivines, and this is still a work in progress, and the composition of the metal associated with the droplets. And this just illustrates a couple maps made by both Steve Simon and Mike Spielding. And you can see that the olivine has, relatively low nickel, much lower than the droplets that are shown there. Unlike Martian olivines, the phosphorus in these olivines tend to be fairly low, and that the phosphorus in the metal seems to be relatively high, although we haven't derived quantitative determination of the phosphorus in the metal. Also, you can see in the D, what you see in the lower left, this is one of the metal droplets associated maybe with a melt inclusion or maybe a fingering of that melt within the olivine. And this has a relatively wide range of composition from the interior and exterior of about iron 85, nickel 14, cobalt 1, and all the way out to portions of it in the rim that tend to be higher in nickel and cobalt on the right side of the rim. And there appears to be a relationship between the sulfur content of this metal phase and its composition. What we haven't done yet, and we're still trying to move forward, is how do these olivine compositions and metal compositions change within the stratigraphy? We don't have a clue with regards to that, and we have a few students and team members who are going to be investigating that over the next month or so. So how does this compare to what we see in terms of metal associated with other magmatic basalts on the moon? Again, this is cobalt plotted against nickel. This is from James Day. And all this data and all the trajectories shown here are from James. The only data that is from our group are these orange data points, the circles, the triangles, and the squares. The circles are from the metal in the pre-eruptive olivines that tend to be fairly iron or nickel cobalt enriched. And if you then look at some of the iron metal that's in the pyroclastic glasses, the ones we've analyzed thus far tend to plot a little bit lower in terms of cobalt and nickel. And then the metal that's associated with the crystalline high titanium crystalline Mari basalts are essentially almost end-member iron metal, and very little cobalt, very little nickel. James had suggested that this trajectory outlined in orange is an instantaneous cumulant formation during fractional crystallization, but it looks like here that this could be a combination of maybe both volatile loss and fractional crystallization rather than just fractional crystallization. And so what we're seeing then is it appears based on the location of these iron metal droplets that are on the outside of the outer rims of the olivine, that the melt was not saturated with metal when it was placed into the crust prior to eruption. You don't have iron nickel metal associated with the interior of the olivines, but you seem to have it at the very rim of the olivines, implying that maybe there was a degassing event during this last stages of crystallization of olivine, and perhaps, and definitely prior to eruption and fragmentation. And so, can we say anything about, this reduction event? What was the degassing event that could have caused this reduction? And this possibilities are shown here. This is from some work that Zach Sharp's done, although I don't have his name up here, but I got his attention. And a group of collaborators from ANU like Penny King, and Penny King actually went through this and kind of identified, using some of Zach's work, some of her former students' work, what could be the gas species that are in the melt, and those are on to the left. And then on the right are potential gas species that could be released by degassing. And then what she did is evaluate what sort of species, in terms of shown here, could essentially reduce like iron, nickel, and cobalt. You can see on the upper diagram to iron 0, nickel 0, or essentially iron, nickel, cobalt metal. And she concluded that there are many volatile loss reactions here that won't do anything. They'll either partially oxidize the melt or won't do anything to the melt. But she identified this particular reaction involving S2 minus in the melt and degassing to S2. And if you take a look at the lower part of the reaction here, that's one of the reactions that could have resulted in the degassing of the melt prior to eruption. And we haven't done this yet, but using the XCT imaging, that we can better understand the distribution of this metal, the proportion of the metal, we can probably get a good handle on the amount of sulfur in the melt needed to degas to form this volume of iron nickel metal. Also, based on just the general differences between the iron nickel metal and the upper part of the column and the abundance of iron nickel metal much larger at the lower part of the column, this suggests that those melts either had higher amounts of sulfur in them or that they degassed more sulfur. So in a qualitative sense, you can get that in terms of the stratigraphy. So what are some of the conclusions? First, there are many mineralogical and textural features correlated to stratigraphy. I just showed a few. Scott Eckley and some of the other work that we've done on thin sections show there are many, many more, including things like there are more volatiles, or not volatile, vesicles in the beads at the bottom. There's some orientation of the glass beads or the beads as you move down the column. The initial melt was not saturated, but a reduction event occurred, causing essentially the formation of these iron, nickel, cobalt metals. There appears to be a correlation in the orange to black bead ratio and such abundances as the iron nickel metal. So there's real, again, a real stratigraphic link to some of these observations. And if we assume, S2 minus degassing and a diffusion coefficient at 1400 degrees, we're in the process of calculating, what time it took to form these iron nickel droplets. And then just a shout out to James Day, that using his diagram, this instantaneous trajectory with regards to where our metals plot seems to be both a fractional crystallization and a reduction trajectory rather than a fractional crystallization trajectory. That's all I had, but I just wanted to again show everybody online this, that in the forms of advertising for the NASA Exploration Science Forum being on the UNM campus this July, and hopefully you can all attend. Questions?
Well, thank you so much, Chip.
Sure.
You can stop sharing the screen here, and then, yeah, we'll open the floor up to questions and stuff. So, Zach, you want to go first?
I want to go first because I have to go to a meeting in a few minutes, but
Yeah, I do too.
I was not ignoring you when I was looking at my.
Oh, I know you are.
This is all the people online who were wondering. We just recently did some experiments where we reduced the salt, which Shmita, she's not here, but just a more, and it had about 0.13% phosphorus in the melt.
Okay.
During the reduction, we made metal beads, and the phosphorus content went up to 5%.
Okay.
It was extraordinary how high it went. It reduced the melt point.
And what sort of temperatures were that? Was that?
Below the melting point of iron. And yet
Okay.
we had iron droplets because we had this enormous enrichment of phosphorus from 0.13 to 5. So I'm wondering if your metal beads, if you have phosphorus, that if you looked for it.
Well, you can see in that map, the X-ray map suggests that possibility, but we haven't made those measurements yet, but we're going to.
My point is that phosphorus is strongly partitioned into the melt. Sulfur, by the way, is not. There's almost no change in the sulfur.
Yeah.
At the same time, I'm wondering if you reduce your melt, your olivine, whatever, to make iron metal, if you really get such a high amount of nickel there. If you're reducing the iron, let's say in olivine, it's going to be an iron metal rather than an iron nickel metal. So I would think that the iron nickel metal is from the source and not from reduction. Because there's not enough nickel in the in the metal and the various components to make 15%.
Yeah, I'm not really quite sure why then you would only have those droplets only on the outside of the olivine. So during almost the whole time olivine is crystallizing, you do not have the melt saturated in iron.
Yep.
And then all of a sudden at that stage.
Okay, and then the last thing I want to say, it's just a throw, we can talk about it more, but, you know, the glass beads have relatively high hydrogen. And a number of people, myself included, propose that the propellant for the explosive nature of these glasses is hydrogen. And if you lose hydrogen, it's an oxidation process, not a reduction process.
Well, it depends what the, you know, what is being, what's the hydrogen species in the melt? It's not H2.
Yeah, but it would be at a low pressure, the hydroxyl that's in the melt would.
It's probably
convert to
OH.
H2. But it would convert to H2, and the H2 is what would be lost.
Okay.
That's the gas species. I mean, the only gas species we have are H2O and H2. And at those low FO2s, the fugacity of hydrogen gas is really very, very high. So it would erupt with hydrogen gas, and losing hydrogen gas is an oxidation mechanism for what stays behind.
Well, the oxygen would stay in the melt, right?
It would become more oxidized here.
Yeah, become more oxidized.
Yeah. So that would be the opposite of making metal grains.
That's right.
The point of that process being that the metal grains are not a process, not related to the volatiles being degassed like during eruption, right? It's something that was definitely.
Well, that's right. And again, what I wanted to point out is that degassing occurred prior to eruption.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
And that, you know, maybe that's the first stage in degassing. And then obviously the next stage is eruption, degassing, and fragmentation to produce the beads.
First, yeah, but that would be after the iron was already applied.
That's right.
Okay, so I guess the other thing is just puzzling me is why you have 15% nickel? Just
Why what?
Really, 15% nickel. My naive feeling was that when you have these high nickel contents in iron in lunar materials, it was like extra lunar. It's like meteorites or something, because that's a lot of nickel to be in something that existed in basalt, isn't it?
Well, you saw in that diagram by James Day.
I haven't seen that before, and I don't quite know what I'm looking at there.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, you know, the data points that were orange are ours. The other data points are from other measurements that he made from various Mare basalts.
Yeah.
So it does illustrate that Mare basalts have metal that can have high nickel and high cobalt in them.
I'm surprised, but yeah, fine.
We have a question from Justin.
Yeah, so Zach might have just beaten my question to death. But my question was somewhat similar, which is questioning the timing or the relationship between the reduction and the eruption. So, but basically, I think what was suggested, as Zach said, doesn't quite work. But maybe what you said, Chip, in that there is a degassing event that's not related to eruption.
That's right.
In the subvolcanic scenario, that's producing the metal that's then growing at the outside of the beads, and then there's some type of eruptive event. Could work, but I don't understand. So I understand that fragmentation would likely happen during the final eruption, but I don't understand why the beads are forming prior to eruption.
No, they aren't.
So it's just the olivine inside the beads that is forming?
It's just the olivine, the coarse grain olivine that have these thin glass rims on them. Those were the pre-eruptive olivines.
Understood that part. Yeah. Okay,
but
so
all the other, and again, the glass beads were produced by the eruption itself. The olivines occurred first before the eruption.
Yeah, I understood that. So then in order for everything to work, basically you have, I'm just thinking out loud, obviously, you have the olivines that are forming. There's some type of maybe loss of sulfur rich volatiles that are reducing the magma. So you then produce the metal along the edges of the olivine. And
Yeah.
then it's erupted with some other presumably volatile rich sort of event that fragments things. But even though the metal that's exposed the edges of the beads or that are in near the edges of the beads, there's not enough time to oxidize them.
That's right.
Okay.
If,
All right.
if there's actually an oxidation event, I don't know if there is.
Right. Yeah, understood. I was just thinking about what
There is an
volatile.
eruptive event. But again, the loss of sulfur, early before eruption could essentially modify the volatile budget for that melt. And does that influence the eruption and eruptive style?
Yeah, I just would have thought of the same thing that Zach was thinking, was that it was moving in the wrong direction.
Yeah. The one thing that's really, again, interesting is that, the dynamics of the eruption based on the cooling, the slower cooling suggested by the black beads suggests that there's a relationship between the dynamics of the eruption and the previous loss of sulfur. And so we really haven't worked that out quite yet, but there is a strong relationship.
Okay, so I think we'll do three last questions. Tony, you'll be first, then we'll go to Pranabundu, and then we'll do Jim. So, Tony, go ahead.
Yeah, so sure. I love this idea of sulfur-driven reduction, but I guess I would say that this is a testable hypothesis because that's a function of the hydrogen sulfur degassing during the eruption event.
Mm-hmm.
And there should be trace element partitioning and effectively the gas volume proportional to that, the reduction capacity in the system. So this should be totally testable.
Yes.
What's known here.
Yeah.
I think it's great.
Yeah. And again, we're taking this step by step in terms of, we didn't have a clue where, where the metal droplets were. The ones associated with the olivine. We didn't know how their composition varied. We didn't know how the metal droplets varied in terms of abundance in the stratigraphic column or the olivine within the stratigraphic column. And now we know all that too.
So the one hang up I would have though is to say that the sulfur speciation shouldn't be dominated by S2. So that's kind of different than my understanding to the majority of the sulfur speciation. So that's one.
Well, again, we're kind of looking at what species, once they're lost from the melt to gas phase, would cause the reduction. And, some of the other ones don't cause that reduction.
Yeah,
So,
the
so
sulfur.
we were kind of juggling which phases in the melt would cause that they're lost.
Yeah, yeah.
But if you could find another species that causes the reduction, I'd be more than willing.
No,
You're obviously an author on some of these research ventures.
Yeah. Well, I think you pinpointed on the fact that sulfide is really effective in that capacity. But the issue is that if the hydrogen capacity is as high as we need to have it erupt,
Yeah.
then it's H2S, and then it's not producing at all.
Yeah.
And maybe it changes during the eruption. That's
Yeah.
the whole process here.
Yeah.
But it's great.
Okay. Thanks, Tony.
Pranabundu?
Sorry, can you hear me?
Yeah, there we
Yes,
go.
we
We
can.
got you.
Yeah. Sorry about that. So yeah, thank you. Hi all. I'm an assistant professor at the Geosciences University of Arizona. Basically, we are looking at the vesicles distribution and the vesicles that is present in this Apollo 17 glass beads. So Pratik is a PhD student who is working on that. Since this is a direct evidence of this being volcanic in origin, but we also kind of like study the degassing model. And so one of the things is that the composition of the gas, this molecular hydrogen versus H2O, that might change as the bubbles form in the magma before fragmentation. So basically, the H2O, because it's present as shown by Sal and Howie and others, that will start degassing at a shallower depth. And so basically that will transfer to a more reduced species, or likely transform to a reduced species like molecular hydrogen at a shallower, while it is erupting at fragmentation. But before that, at shallower depth, it is possible that the oxidized species, it's basically degassed into these bubbles as they are forming into the magma. And so just wanted to point that out. So we are basically varying the hydrogen carbon different species like CO, CO2, molecular hydrogen, and H2O, and that's what we are observing. So we have a talk at LPSC, and Pratik has a poster at LPSC. I'll welcome all of you to attend probably. Thank you.
Yeah, I will be there and be looking forward to talking to you.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, me too.
Thanks.
Thank you. Jim, will you take it away for the last question?
Yeah, can you hear me okay?
Yeah, sure can, Tim.
Okay, how you doing? So, okay, two things. One, we've recently developed a model of the generation, ascent, and eruption and the volatile evolution of basaltic magmas on the moon. And I put it in chat, okay? So the reference is there, Morgan et al. And we also model the loss of volatiles in a plume as well. So you might find this of interest for people who are working on that. But my question is, and email me if you don't get it before the chat goes down, but my question is, can you think of anything that, I'm just still dumbfounded by the lack of correlation between the pyroclastics and the basalts in both 15 and 17 sites. So the question is, if I were to tell you that I talked to somebody upstairs and they said, actually, they're related, is there anything that you could think of in the ascent and generation ascent stages that might be something that you would modulate to make them connected? Is there any way that, oh, wait, if they sat for a while, or if they did this, or if they did that, can you think of any avenue for kind of like exploration and research that might help us put the nail in a coffin? Okay, they're not related, or hey, maybe they are.
Yeah, well, Jim, I actually sat around and had numerous beers over various times with John Longy, because, he was the one who initially, put together, carried out the experiments to look at liquid lines of descent. And then, I kind of followed that up by looking at trace elements along those liquid lines of descent. And again, we didn't seem to be able to relate those through the data we had. And, as you can see in that diagram that I showed earlier, that was, I think it was a ytterbium lanthanum diagram. Any sort of magmatic process like fractional crystallization or anything along those lines would take you along a line that is kind of at 45 degrees from the origin, or some angle like that.
Yeah.
And so, having the glasses, and again, a lot of the other Apollo 17 crystalline Mare basalts, there are, type C, Bs, and As. Those are all slightly different and from different sources. So I'm stuck too. I don't know, but I wouldn't mind sitting down with you and kicking this around a little bit in a couple of weeks.
Okay, yeah, I'd love to do that. Let's plan on it.
Yeah. Okay.
Let's meet in Houston just for between the two of us. Okay, thanks a lot. Keep up the great work.
Okay, well, thanks.
Thank you so much, Jim, and apologies to those that we couldn't get the questions to. I know we're out of time. Chip, you have to get to a faculty meeting. So, Chip, once again, thank you so much.
Well, thanks, guys.
Hey, Chip, faculty meeting or more science discussion? What's up with that?
Please join us next week. We're going to have Dan Moriarty from Goddard. He will be giving a talk about Artemis exploration sites potentially at the lunar South Pole. But thank you guys again so much for joining us today. So we hope to see you guys next week. Have a good one, everybody. Thank you.
When did you get in?